Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished connecting the last power coupling on the massive fusion reactor. The alien engineers around him chittered in their strange languages, but he knew they were impressed. 3 years working with the Kepler Trade Consortium had taught him to read their body language, even when he could not understand their words. The orbital station. Meridian 7 stretched out in all directions around him like a small metal city floating. In space, thousands of aliens from 7 different species worked here together, trading goods and sharing technology. Jake was the only human on the station, and sometimes he felt very alone, but the work kept him busy. The consortium paid him well to solve problems at their best. Engineers could not handle. Admiral Vextar approached him with that slow, careful walk that all reptilian leaders used when they wanted to show importance. His scales were dark green today, which meant he was in a good mood. Jake had learned to read these signs because it helped him know when to ask for better equipment or time off. "Human Morrison, your work on the reactor is acceptable," Vextar said in his hissing voice. "The power output has increased by 30%, exactly as you promised." Jake nodded and started packing his tools. "Just basic engineering, sir." "You had all the right parts, but nobody thought to link the plasma flows in parallel. Instead of series." "Indeed." Vextar paused and his scales shifted to a lighter shade. "You humans have interesting ways of thinking about problems. Very different from our methods." Something in the Admiral's tone made Jake look up from his toolbox. There was an odd quality to the way Vextar was watching him, like a scientist studying a lab specimen. Jake had felt this kind of attention before from other consortium members, but never from someone as high-ranking as an admiral. "Different can be good, sir." "Fresh perspectives often lead to better solutions." "Yes, fresh perspectives." Vextar's scales darkened again. "Tell me, Morrison, do you ever wonder why the consortium invited humans to work with us?" The question seemed innocent enough, but Jake sensed something underneath it. "I assume you needed our engineering skills." "Humans are good at solving complex problems." "You are indeed." Vextar turned to look out the viewport at the stars beyond. Perhaps too good. Before Jake could ask what that meant, the Admiral walked away, leaving him alone with his tools and a growing sense that something was very wrong. He had been working with aliens for 3 years and thought he understood how the consortium operated. They were careful and methodical in everything they did. Nothing happened by accident, and every decision was made for specific reasons. That night in his small quarters, Jake could not sleep. Vextar's words kept running through his mind, along with dozens of small details he had noticed over the past few months. Consortium engineers asking very specific questions about human technology. Security codes being changed without explanation. Shipments of materials that did not match the official manifests. Jake was good with computers, and over the years he had learned how to access systems that were not exactly meant for human eyes. He told himself he was just curious about how alien technology worked, but deep down he knew he was looking for something else. The feeling that he was missing an important piece of the puzzle had been growing stronger every day. He activated his personal terminal and began searching through the station's databases. Most of the files were routine maintenance reports and supply inventories, but buried deep in the administrative sections he found something that made his blood run cold. Project Terra Nullius was classified at the highest levels, but Jake's access code still worked. The file contained detailed analysis of every piece of human technology he had ever worked on. Every innovation he had shared with consortium engineers had been carefully studied and reverse engineered. They had taken his solutions to their problems and turned them into weapons. But that was not the worst part. The final section of the file contained invasion plans for Earth's outer colonies. The consortium saw humanity as a threat that needed to be eliminated before humans could develop their own interstellar navy. They planned to strike first using weapons and tactics derived from human engineering principles. Jake's hands shook as he read through fleet deployment schedules and target lists. New Denver, where his sister lived and worked. Titan Station, where his old college roommate had taken a job. Green Valley, where thousands of families had gone to start new lives. All of them marked for destruction. The irony was bitter. Jake had spent 3 years trying to build bridges between humans and aliens. He had believed that cooperation and mutual respect would help humanity earn its place among the galactic community. Instead, he had been helping the consortium prepare for genocide. A soft chime from his door made Jake jump. He quickly closed the files and tried to look casual as he opened the door. Admiral Vexstar stood in the corridor with 2 armed guards behind him. "Morrison, I hope you are not having trouble sleeping." The Admiral's scales were almost black now, which Jake had learned meant danger. "Just some late-night reading, sir. Technical manuals mostly." "I see." Vexstar stepped into the room without being invited. "Perhaps you would be interested in some light reading about your home system? I have some fascinating reports about Earth's defensive capabilities." Jake's heart pounded, but he kept his face neutral. "That sounds interesting, but I should probably get some sleep." "Early shift tomorrow. Actually, Morrison, I think you should know that we are aware of your recent computer activities." Vexstar's voice was cold now. "Accessing classified files is a serious violation of consortium security protocols." The guards moved closer, and Jake realized he had been caught. The consortium knew he had discovered their plans, and they were not going to let him leave the station alive. His mind raced through possible options, but there were no weapons in his quarters, and no way to fight his way past alien soldiers. "I can offer you a choice, human," Vexstar continued. "You can continue working for us with full knowledge of our plans. Your expertise would be valuable in the coming campaign against your species. Or you can choose to oppose us and face the consequences." Jake looked at the Admiral and made his decision. "I choose option 3. Before anyone could react, Jake activated a hidden subroutine on his personal terminal. The code spread through Meridian 7's computer network, like a virus awakening dormant programs he had embedded in every system he had ever worked on. Emergency klaxons began blaring as power fluctuations cascaded through the station. In the chaos that followed, Jake pushed past the surprised guards and ran for the maintenance bay where he kept his small personal craft. Behind him he could hear Vexstar shouting orders in the reptilian language, but the station systems were failing too fast for anyone to coordinate a proper response. Jake's ship was barely more than a maintenance pod with a small FTL drive, but it would have to be enough. As he powered up the engines, he could see consortium warships moving to intercept him, but his sabotage had confused their targeting systems. He jumped to hyperspace just as the first energy beams lanced through the space where his ship had been. He was free, but Earth's colonies were still in danger, and he was the only one who knew what was coming. Jake set course for human space, knowing that he had maybe weeks before the consortium invasion fleet arrived. The boy from Ohio who had dreamed of working with aliens had become humanity's only warning of the storm that was coming. Jake's stolen maintenance ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace near New Denver Colony. The small craft was never meant for long-distance travel, and 3 of its main systems had failed during the desperate flight from consortium space. Warning lights flashed red across the control panel, and the air recycling system made grinding noises that told him he had maybe hours before it stopped working completely. New Denver sat in orbit around a small blue star on the very edge of human territory. The colony was built on a large asteroid that had been hollowed out and converted into living space for about 30,000 miners and their families. It was not an important world in political terms, but it was home to people Jake cared about, including his sister, Kate, who worked as a geology supervisor. Colonial Administrator Lisa Martinez met Jake at the docking bay with a security team and a lot of questions. She was a tough woman in her 50s who had spent 20 years managing frontier colonies and did not easily believe wild stories from strangers. Jake looked like he had been through hell with his torn clothes and exhausted face, but that did not make his warnings any more credible. "You claim that a massive alien fleet is coming to destroy us," Lisa said as they walked through the colony's main corridor. "Do you have any proof besides your word?" Jake pulled out a datapad containing everything he had stolen from the consortium databases. Fleet positions, battle plans, target lists, and technical specifications for their weapons. "Everything you need." To confirm that I'm telling the truth, Lisa stopped walking and took the datapad. Her expression changed as she scrolled through the files, reading details that matched classified intelligence reports from Earth Command. The consortium had been very careful to hide their preparations, but Jake's insider access had given him information that human spies could never have obtained. "This is real," she said quietly. "How long do we have?" 3 weeks, maybe 4, if they stick to the original schedule. Jake rubbed his tired eyes. "The invasion fleet is already moving toward human space. Once they cross the border, there will be no stopping them." Lisa activated her communication device and called an emergency meeting of the Colony Council. Within an hour, Jake found himself standing in front of 12 civilians who represented New Denver's government, trying to convince them that their world was about to be attacked by enemies they had never heard of. The colony's military advisor was Captain Roy Walsh, a retired Earth Navy officer who commanded 2 old patrol ships and a handful of security personnel. He listened to Jake's briefing with growing alarm as the technical details made it clear that New Denver had no hope of defending itself against a consortium battle fleet. "We need to evacuate," Walsh said bluntly. "Get as many people as possible onto transport ships and head for Earth space." "With what ships?" Lisa asked. "We have cargo haulers and mining vessels. Nothing that could carry 30,000 people, and definitely nothing fast enough to outrun consortium warships." Jake had been thinking about this problem during his flight from Meridian 7, and he had reached a different conclusion. "We do not run. We fight." The room erupted in arguments about the impossibility of fighting a superior enemy force, but Jake raised his hand for silence. "I have been working with consortium technology for 3 years. I know their strengths and their weaknesses. More importantly, I know how they think about warfare." He moved to the display screen and began sketching diagrams of the New Denver system. "They expect us to meet them ship to ship in traditional space combat. Big guns, heavy armor, and lots of firepower. We cannot win that kind of fight." "So what do you suggest?" Captain Walsh asked. "We change the rules." Jake's eyes lit up with the kind of enthusiasm that had made him famous among consortium engineers. "We turn this entire system into a weapon using nothing but mining equipment and basic physics." The idea sounded insane to everyone in the room except Jake, who had spent years solving impossible problems by thinking outside normal boundaries. He explained how the colony's fusion reactors could be linked to the mining laser array, creating a power grid capable of channeling enormous amounts of energy. The asteroid mining drones could be reprogrammed to work as construction units, building massive structures in space. Most ambitious of all was Jake's plan for the gas giant Hercules, which dominated the outer system. By placing precisely timed fusion charges in the planet's atmosphere, he could create controlled reactions that would turn Hercules into a gravitational cannon capable of hurling objects at incredible speeds. "You want to weaponize a planet," Lisa said slowly. "I want to weaponize everything," Jake replied. "The asteroids, the gas giant, the space between them, and the laws of physics themselves. The consortium thinks in terms of ships and guns, but we are going to think bigger." Captain Walsh shook his head. "Even if this crazy plan could work, we do not have the resources or the time to build these modifications." "Yes, we do." Jake was already running calculations in his head. "This is a mining colony, which means you have fusion reactors, heavy equipment, and people who know how to move massive objects in zero gravity. Most importantly, you have something the consortium does not have." "What is that?" Lisa asked. "Humans who refuse to accept that a problem cannot be solved." The debate continued for hours, but eventually Jake's passion and technical expertise won over the skeptics. The colony had no other realistic options for survival, and his plan at least offered hope, even if it seemed impossible. Lisa authorized emergency powers that gave Jake access to all of New Denver's resources and personnel. Within 12 hours, he had teams of engineers and miners working around the clock to implement modifications that violated several established principles of engineering. The first challenge was connecting the colony's 3 fusion reactors to the mining laser array. The power conduits had to be completely rebuilt to handle energy flows that were never intended for the existing systems. Jake solved this by using superconducting cables normally reserved for industrial fabrication and cooling them with liquid Helium from the colony's life support reserves. The second challenge was reprogramming 200 mining drones to work as coordinated construction units. Each drone had its own simple computer, but they were not designed to operate as a unified network. Jake wrote new software that allowed them to share sensor data and coordinate their actions like a swarm of mechanical insects. The most difficult challenge was modifying Hercules itself. Jake's plan required placing fusion charges at specific points in the gas giant's atmosphere where they could trigger chain reactions in the planet's chemical composition. The charges had to be delivered by mining ships that were not built for atmospheric entry and positioned with mathematical precision. As consortium scout ships began appearing at the edge of the system, Jake's modifications were only 70% complete. His teams were exhausted from working continuous shifts, and several critical systems were still untested. The gravitational calculations for the planetary weapon were so complex that Jake had to use every computer on the colony just to run the simulations. Kate Morrison found her brother in the main engineering center staring at displays covered with equations and technical diagrams. He had not slept in 3 days and looked like he was running on pure determination and caffeine. "Jake, you need to rest," she said. "You are no good to anyone if you collapse, cannot rest," he muttered while adjusting power flow parameters. 2. Much work still to do and not enough time. The people are scared, Kate continued. They need to see that you believe this will work. Jake looked up from his calculations and saw the fear in his sister's eyes. She was trying to be strong, but the weight of 30,000 lives depending on his impossible plan was crushing. He realized that everyone on New Denver was looking to him for salvation, and he was just one human engineer with too little time and too few resources. "I do believe it will work," he said finally. "It has to work because the alternative is unthinkable." The Consortium Advance Fleet arrived 2 days early, catching Jake's teams in the middle of final preparations. As alien warships took position at the edge of the system, he activated his incomplete defenses and prepared to test whether human engineering could defeat superior firepower through pure stubborn creativity. Admiral Vexstar stood on the bridge of his flagship watching the New Denver system through the main viewer. His scales showed the deep green color of satisfaction as he observed what appeared to be a desperate and poorly planned defense. The human colony had arranged some mining equipment in crude formations around their asteroid, but nothing that could threaten a proper military force. The consortium battle fleet numbered 147 warships, including heavy cruisers, that could reduce planets to molten rock. Each ship was crewed by experienced warriors from species that had been fighting interstellar wars for thousands of years. Against this assembled might, the humans had mining lasers and industrial equipment operated by civilians who had never seen real combat. "Admiral, the humans appear to have linked their power systems in an unusual configuration," reported Science Officer Krex from his station. "Their energy signatures are much higher than expected for a mining colony." Vexstar's scales shifted slightly toward yellow, which indicated mild interest. "How much higher?" "Approximately 300% above normal levels, sir. They seem to have connected multiple fusion reactors in parallel." "Curious, but not threatening." Vexstar settled into his command chair. "Begin the attack. Destroy their defensive installations first, then move in to eliminate the colony itself." The first wave of consortium ships advanced toward the asteroid field surrounding New Denver, expecting to sweep aside the pathetic human defenses within minutes. Instead, they encountered something that challenged their understanding of both engineering and tactical doctrine. Jake Morrison watched the approaching enemy fleet from the colony's command center, surrounded by displays showing power levels, weapon status, and gravitational readings from throughout the system. His modifications were only 85% complete, but he was out of time. The consortium had arrived early, and he would have to make do with what he had built. "Activate asteroid defense grid," he said quietly into his headset. Throughout the New Denver system, mining equipment came online in coordinated sequences that had never been attempted before. The asteroid field that had once been scattered mining claims was now connected through a network of power cables and gravitational tethers. that linked hundreds of individual rocks into a single massive mechanism. The first consortium ships entered the asteroid field and immediately discovered that destroying these primitive fortifications was not as simple as expected. When energy beams struck one asteroid, the explosion triggered responses in dozens of others. The entire field moved and shifted like a living thing, creating new defensive positions faster than the consortium targeting computers could track. Commander Zeph of the heavy cruiser Dominator found his ship surrounded by asteroids that had not been there moments before. His weapons officer reported multiple targets, but every time they destroyed one rock, 3 more moved into position to replace it. The humans had somehow turned mining equipment into a defensive system that operated without central control. Sir, the asteroids are connected by some kind of field generators, the tactical officer reported. When we destroy one, the others compensate by adjusting their positions. Impossible, Zeph snapped. Rocks cannot think, but Jake's mining drones were providing the intelligence that made the system work. 200 small robots moved through the asteroid field, constantly adjusting the gravitational tethers and power connections that held everything together. Each drone carried sensors that fed information to a central computer network that calculated optimal defensive formations in real time. Admiral Vexstar watched his advanced ships struggle against an enemy that seemed to violate basic principles of warfare. Individual asteroids were easy targets, but the field as a whole appeared to be immune to conventional attack. Every time his forces gained an advantage, the humans reconfigured their defenses to eliminate it. Sir, we are receiving reports of unusual gravitational phenomena near the gas giant, the sensor operator announced. Massive energy discharges in the upper atmosphere. Vexstar S scales darkened to orange, which meant serious concern. Show me. The main viewer switched to display Hercules, where Jake's fusion charges had been detonating for the past 6 hours. The explosions were small by planetary standards, but they were carefully positioned to create chain reactions in the gas giant's chemical composition. Regions of space around Hercules were becoming unstable as gravitational fields fluctuated wildly. Jake had turned basic orbital mechanics into a weapon by using the planet's own mass and rotation as components in a massive gravity cannon. By timing the fusion explosions precisely, he could create gravitational waves that would accelerate objects to significant fractions of light speed. All ships maintain distance from the gas giant, Vexstar ordered. Focus our attack on the colony itself, but Jake was not finished with his surprises. As consortium ships moved into formation for their final assault, he activated the mining laser array that had been modified far beyond its original specifications. The linked fusion reactors provided enough power to turn simple industrial tools into weapons that could challenge military-grade shields. Beams of coherent energy lanced out from hidden positions throughout the asteroid field, striking consortium ships with precision that should have been impossible for mining equipment. The lasers were not individually powerful enough to destroy warships, but Jake had programmed them to work together, focusing multiple beams on single targets. The consortium fleet found itself fighting an enemy that used the entire solar system as a battlefield. Asteroids moved to block their advance, while gravitational anomalies near Hercules disrupted their formations. Mining lasers struck from unexpected angles, and every time they adapted to one threat, the humans revealed another layer of their impossible defenses. Admiral, we have lost 17 ships and our formation is breaking apart, reported the fleet tactical officer. The humans appear to have weaponized their entire system. Vexstar stared at the tactical display, trying to understand how mining equipment operated by civilians was destroying his carefully planned invasion. The consortium had superior firepower, better armor, and more experienced crews, but none of that mattered when the humans refused to fight according to established rules. Jake activated his masterpiece as consortium battleships moved within range of Hercules. The gas giant had been turned into a gravitational cannon capable of hurling dense metallic asteroids at velocities that turned them into kinetic weapons more powerful than antimatter bombs. The first barrage struck the consortium flagship before its shields could adapt to the new threat. Asteroids moving at 40% of light speed punched through military-grade armor like paper and turned the massive warship into an expanding cloud of debris. Admiral Vextar found himself aboard a ship that was breaking apart around him as more kinetic projectiles slammed into the fleet. His last thought before the bridge exploded was that humans were insane to think that physics itself could be used as a weapon, but Jake Morrison was not insane. He was an engineer who had been forced to solve the ultimate problem with limited resources and no time for conventional solutions. He had taken mining equipment, fusion reactors, and the laws of physics themselves and turned them into a defensive system that protected 30,000 civilians from military forces that should have been unstoppable. As the surviving consortium ships retreated in disorder, Jake slumped in his chair, exhausted but victorious. He had proven that human engineering could overcome superior firepower through pure creative stubbornness and the willingness to treat the impossible as merely difficult. Lisa Martinez placed a hand on his shoulder and smiled at the man who had saved their world. "Jake, how did you know this would work?" "I did not know," he replied honestly. "But I knew that giving up was not an option, so I had to try something that had never been attempted before. The battle for New Denver was over, but Jake realized that his real work was just beginning. Throughout human space, other colonies faced the same threat, and they would need the same kind of impossible solutions. He had created more than a defensive system. He had created a new way of thinking about problems that could change how humanity approached warfare itself. The consortium had superior technology and overwhelming firepower, but humans had something more valuable. They had engineers who refused to accept that any situation was hopeless and the creativity to turn limitations into advantages. As rescue ships arrived to help with damage control, Jake began planning his next impossible project. The consortium would be back with better ships and new tactics, but humanity would be ready with solutions that no alien military doctrine could anticipate. He was just one furious human engineer, but he had proven that sometimes one person with the right tools and enough determination could change the course of history itself. News of the New Denver victory spread through human space faster than consortium intelligence could track it. Jake Morrison had done more than defeat an invasion fleet. He had proven that human colonies could defend themselves using nothing but engineering creativity and the willingness to think beyond conventional limitations. At Titan Station orbiting Saturn, engineer Lisa Parker received Jake's technical specifications while consortium scouts were already probing the outer edges of her system. Parker was a former Earth Navy weapons specialist who had spent 5 years designing more efficient ways to kill people. Now she had 3 days to figure out how to save 8,000 civilians using an orbital platform and whatever resources she could scavenge. Parker studied Jake's methodology rather than trying to copy his specific solutions. The key insight was not what Jake had built, but how he had approached the problem. Instead of asking what her equipment was designed to do, she needed to ask what it could do if she ignored its intended purpose completely. Titan Station was a massive orbital facility built to process gases from Saturn's atmosphere. The station rotated slowly to provide artificial gravity, and its central hub contained fusion reactors that powered the atmospheric processors. Parker realized that rotation and magnetic field generators could be combined to turn the entire platform into a railgun capable of launching projectiles at incredible velocities. She had mining crews strip hull plating from unused sections of the station and reshape the metal into dense kinetic rounds. The atmospheric processors became ammunition factories that could manufacture and launch projectiles continuously for months. When consortium ships arrived expecting to find a defenseless research station, they instead encountered a weapons platform that hurled metal slugs with the force of tactical nuclear weapons. At the Proxima Centauri shipyard's chief technician Kevin Barnes faced a different challenge. His facility was still under construction with half-finished cargo ships and industrial equipment scattered throughout the system. Barnes had been following Jake's progress through encrypted communications and understood that conventional thinking would get everyone killed. Barnes took an incomplete cargo hauler and filled its massive holds with industrial fabricators programmed to produce kinetic projectiles on demand. The ship became a mobile weapons factory that could manufacture and deploy ammunition while moving through space. Its cargo capacity allowed it to sustain bombardment operations that would exhaust traditional warships within hours, but Barnes went further than simple kinetic weapons. He programmed the fabricators to produce smart munitions that could adjust their trajectories after launch and coordinate attacks with other projectiles. The consortium fleet found itself fighting ammunition that seemed to think for itself and adapt to changing tactical situations. On the agricultural world of Green Valley engineer Maria Santos faced the challenge of defending a planet with nothing but farming equipment and atmospheric processors. Santos had spent 10 years developing weather control systems that could manage planetary climate patterns. She realized that the same technology could create electromagnetic storms, capable of disabling electronics across an entire star system. Santos modified the planet's ionosphere, using atmospheric processors and orbital satellites to generate massive electrical discharges. When consortium ships entered the system, they found themselves flying through space that was filled with electromagnetic interference. Their targeting systems failed, their communications broke down, and their coordination fell apart as each ship became isolated in a storm of electrical chaos. The agricultural colony's weather control system became a weapon that could blind and confuse enemy fleets while leaving human defenders unaffected. Santos had weaponized the sky itself, using equipment designed to water crops and control rainfall. Each human colony developed defenses, adapted to local resources and conditions, but all shared Jake's fundamental approach. Engineers stopped thinking about what their equipment was supposed to do, and started thinking about what the laws of physics would allow them to accomplish. At the mining station, Series Belt engineer Robert Stone turned asteroid mining equipment into a mass driver system that could accelerate rocks to velocities that made them more dangerous than military missiles. The mining operation became a kinetic weapons platform that used the asteroid belt itself as ammunition. Engineer Michelle Clark at Europa Base converted the Moon's ice mining operation into a defensive system that used supercooled projectiles to freeze consortium ships solid. The ice became a weapon that could disable enemy vessels by crystallizing their hull materials and jamming their mechanical systems throughout human space. The pattern repeated as civilian engineers discovered that creativity and determination could overcome superior firepower. The consortium found themselves fighting not just human colonies, but an entire philosophy of warfare that treated every tool, every resource, and every natural phenomenon as a potential weapon. Admiral Corex, who had taken command after Vexstar's death, struggled to understand how his forces were being systematically defeated by mining equipment, agricultural machinery, and industrial fabricators. Every time the consortium adapted their tactics to counter one type of human defense, they encountered completely different solutions at the next target. The humans are not following any known military doctrine, his tactical advisor reported during a strategy meeting. Each colony uses different weapons and different approaches. There is no pattern we can predict or counter. Corex studied intelligence reports from failed attacks across human space, mining lasers that fired in coordinated barrages, gravitational weapons that used gas giants as ammunition, electromagnetic storms that turned space itself hostile, industrial fabricators that produce smart ammunition in real time. They are not using military doctrine at all, Corex realized. They are using engineering principles applied to warfare. Each solution is custom designed for local conditions and resources. The consortium's military traditions emphasized standardized tactics and proven strategies that had worked for thousands of years against conventional enemies. But humans were not conventional enemies. They were engineers who treated warfare as just another technical problem that required creative solutions. Jake Morrison had become something of a legend among human colonists, but more importantly, he had started a revolution in thinking that was spreading throughout human space. His success at New Denver had proven that superior firepower could be defeated by superior creativity, and now every human engineer was trying to solve their own impossible defensive problems. The consortium's intelligence networks detected increased communications between human colonies as engineers shared technical data and theoretical approaches. But the information being exchanged was not specific weapon designs or tactical plans. Instead, humans were sharing methodologies for creative problem solving and ways to think. About physics that ignored traditional limitations, Jake's influence extended beyond individual defensive systems. He had created a new culture of engineering that approached every problem with the assumption that a solution existed if you were willing to think creatively enough to find it. Human colonies were no longer just mining operations and agricultural settlements. They were research laboratories where engineers competed to find new ways of solving impossible problems. The consortium began receiving requests for peace negotiations from some of their member species who realized that the war with humanity was not going according to plan. Traditional military thinking assumed that superior technology and overwhelming numbers would eventually prevail, but the humans kept finding new ways to turn their disadvantages into advantages. Engineer Lisa Parker at Titan Station summed up the new human approach in a message she sent to Jake after successfully defending her facility against a consortium battle group. You taught us that the word impossible just means nobody has figured out how to do it yet. Give an engineer enough time and resources, and impossible becomes inevitable. Jake read her message while working on modifications to New Denver's defenses that would make them even more effective against future attacks. He had started as one furious human engineer trying to save his sister's colony, but he had accidentally created something much larger. Humanity was learning that their greatest weapon was not superior technology or military might, but their refusal to accept that any problem could not be solved. The consortium had better ships and more firepower, but humans had something more valuable. They had engineers who could look at mining equipment and see weapons. They could look at farming tools and see defensive systems. They could look at the laws of physics themselves and see unlimited possibilities for creative solutions. The war was far from over, but the balance of power was shifting as human creativity proved more adaptable than alien military doctrine. Jake had given humanity something more powerful than weapons or fleets. He had given them confidence in their own ability to solve any problem, no matter how impossible it seemed. 6 months after the failed invasion, Admiral Korex sat in a detention cell aboard the human research vessel, Columbia, watching through his small window as human and alien engineers worked together to modify his own ship's drive systems. The consortium's military had been scattered, with member species scrambling to negotiate separate peace treaties with human representatives, who seemed remarkably uninterested in traditional concepts of conquest or territorial expansion. Jake Morrison had become Chief Innovation Officer for the Colonial Defense Initiative, but he spent most of his time working on projects that had nothing to do with warfare. The consortium's betrayal had taught humanity a valuable lesson about survival in a galaxy full of species with superior firepower and established territorial claims. The human approach to interstellar relations had fundamentally changed after New Denver. Instead of trying to match alien strengths, humanity had decided to make those strengths irrelevant by becoming indispensable. Every human colony was now a research laboratory where engineers competed to solve problems that other species considered impossible. At New Denver, Jake worked with a team of volunteers, including his sister Kate, to develop new applications for gravitational manipulation technology. Their current project involved using controlled gravity fields to accelerate plant growth in ways that could feed entire star systems using minimal resources. Other teams worked on medical applications, atmospheric engineering, and faster-than-light communication systems. The consortium's former enemies were becoming customers and partners as alien species realized that humans possessed something more valuable than military might. They had the ability to look at any situation and find solutions that nobody else had considered. The Altarian Republic was the first to formally request human assistance with a problem their own scientists had declared unsolvable. Their home star was showing signs of instability that would lead to total system collapse within 50 years. Traditional stellar engineering approaches required resources and technology that even the advanced Altarians could not provide. Jake led a team of human engineers to the Altarian system, where they spent 3 months studying the dying star and developing solutions that violated several accepted principles of astrophysics. Instead of trying to stop the stellar collapse, they designed a way to control and direct it, turning the star's death into a controlled rebirth that would extend its life by millions of years. The project required modifications to the star itself. Using gravitational manipulation techniques developed from Jake's planetary weapon designs, human engineers worked alongside Altarian scientists to build massive, orbital platforms that could channel stellar energy in ways that stabilized the fusion processes in the star's core. Your species approaches problems very differently than ours, observed Chief Scientist Veltar as he watched human engineers install equipment that should not have been able to function in a stellar environment. You seem to assume that any limitation can be overcome with sufficient creativity. Jake smiled as he adjusted the gravitational field generators that would save an entire solar system. That is because we have learned that the word impossible usually just means nobody has tried the right approach yet. The Altarian project's success brought requests from other species throughout the galaxy. The Crystalline Collective needed help developing new manufacturing processes after human engineers demonstrated ways to grow complex machinery using modified biological systems. The Aquatic Federation wanted assistance with underwater cities that could survive in environments where traditional construction methods failed. Each project taught human engineers new techniques and expanded their understanding of what was possible when conventional thinking was abandoned. More importantly, these collaborations showed that human creativity could be shared and applied to problems throughout the galaxy. Jake established the Interspecies Engineering Exchange as a formal program that paired human engineers with alien scientists to work on collaborative projects. Unlike his previous work with the consortium, these partnerships operated under strict protocols designed to prevent technology theft and ensure mutual benefit. The exchange program became wildly successful, as species throughout the galaxy discovered that human engineers could solve problems that had been frustrating their best scientists for centuries. But humans also learned from alien expertise in fields like quantum mechanics, biological engineering, and energy manipulation. Lisa Martinez, who had become Director of Colonial Affairs, visited Jake at his new Denver laboratory where he was working on a project to convert gas giant atmospheres into breathable air for terraforming operations. The same gravitational manipulation technology that had defeated the consortium was now being used to create new worlds for species that needed different environmental conditions. "Sometimes I wonder if you realize what you started," Lisa said, as she watched Jake adjust equations on a holographic display. "You have changed how humanity interacts with the rest of the galaxy." Jake paused in his calculations and looked up at his old friend. "I was just trying to save my sister's colony. Everything else happened because people realized that creative engineering could solve problems that seemed impossible. You taught us that humans do not have to be the strongest or the most advanced to be valuable," Lisa continued. "We just have to be the most willing to try solutions that nobody else would consider." The transformation of human space continued as colonies evolved from simple mining and agricultural operations into research centers that attracted scientists from throughout the galaxy. Earth's government initially worried about brain drain as their best engineers left to work on frontier projects, but they soon realized that the colonies were becoming humanity's greatest diplomatic and economic assets. Admiral Corex, who had been studying human engineering methods during his captivity, was eventually released as part of a prisoner exchange program. His first act upon returning to consortium space was to recommend that his government abandon all plans for military action against human colonies and instead negotiate for access to human engineering expertise. "The humans have weaponized creativity itself," he reported to the consortium leadership. "They do not fight wars in any conventional sense. They solve the problem of warfare by making it irrelevant." The consortium's member species began competing with each other to establish partnerships with human colonies and research programs. What had started as an attempted genocide had become a scramble for access to human innovation and problem-solving capabilities. Jake received regular reports about similar programs throughout human space as other engineers established their own research partnerships and collaborative projects. Engineer Lisa Parker at Teton Station was working with gas giant specialists to develop new atmospheric processing techniques. Engineer Maria Santos at Green Valley had become famous throughout agricultural worlds for weather control systems that could optimize crop yields on any planet. The human approach to galactic relations was spreading as other species began adopting engineering methodologies that emphasized creative problem-solving over traditional limitations. The galaxy was becoming a more innovative and collaborative place as the human philosophy of treating impossible problems as engineering challenges influenced scientific communities throughout known space. Jake often thought about Admiral Vexstar and the consortium's original plan to eliminate humanity before humans could develop their own interstellar navy. The irony was that humans had become more powerful than any military force. By refusing to compete on traditional terms, human colonies were no longer targets for conquest because they had become too valuable as research partners and problem-solving resources. Species throughout the galaxy had realized that having humans as enemies was expensive and dangerous, while having humans as partners was profitable and beneficial. As Jake watched human and alien engineers work together on projects that would have been considered impossible just a year earlier, he realized that the consortium's betrayal had been the best thing that could have happened to humanity. It had forced humans to discover their true strength, which was not military might or superior technology, but the absolute refusal to accept that any problem could not be solved. The boy from Ohio who had dreamed of working with aliens had become the man who taught the galaxy that creativity and determination were more powerful than weapons and fleets. He had proven that sometimes the most furious response to betrayal was to become so indispensable that former enemies had no choice but to become partners. Jake Morrison was still just one human engineer, but he had started a revolution that was changing how the entire galaxy approached the challenge of turning the impossible into the inevitable.